In 1994, a man was taken by violence in Cleveland, Ohio. He left behind a daughter who would grow up without him. That daughter was Takeyra Collins. 25 years later, Takeyra did everything right. She called off the engagement. She told him to leave. She had gone to the courts before, filed the paperwork, asked for protection, put her fear on the record. By every measure of what a survivor of domestic violence is supposed to do, Takeyra Collins followed the playbook. On the night of the 8th of July 2019, in the Slavic Village neighborhood of Cleveland, Armond Johnson Sr. let himself into her home on East 63rd Street. By morning, 4 people were gone: Takeyra, her 6-year-old son, her 2-year-old daughter, and a neighbor who had nothing to do with any of it. The same city, a different generation, the same result. This is that story. Takeyra Collins was 25 years old and living in Cleveland's Slavic Village neighborhood with her 2 children. Everyone who knew her said the same thing: she was built around those kids. Not in a surface-level way, in the real way, where every decision she made and every plan she had for the future ran through 2 little faces first. Her son, Armond Johnson Sr., was 6 years old. Her daughter, Aubrey Stone, was 2. Those children were her whole world, and the people around her knew it. Family members described a woman who kept her children close even when life was hard, who refused to let the difficulty of her situation become the environment her kids grew up in. She wanted something better for them. She was building toward it one day at a time. She worked. She pushed forward. She kept trying to build something stable, but there was a person in her life making that harder than it should have been, and his name was Armond Johnson Sr. Takeyra and Armond Johnson Sr. had history that stretched back years, the kind of history that court records make visible even when people try to keep it private. There had been prior allegations. There had been protective orders. Takeyra had gone to the legal system before, asking for protection from the very man she was engaged to marry. In March 2019, Johnson was released from prison. Like a lot of couples do, they tried again. They got engaged. Family members allowed themselves to hope that this time would be different. It wasn't. According to prosecutors, the relationship deteriorated quickly back to the same patterns: tension, threats, and fear. About a month before the murders, Takeyra made her decision. She called off the engagement, accused Johnson of abusing her and threatening her with a firearm, and told him to leave her home. What Takeyra almost certainly did not know is what domestic violence experts consistently document. The moment a survivor leaves an abusive relationship is often the most dangerous point in the entire cycle, not the safest. When control slips away from someone who has built their identity around having it, some don't accept that quietly. Notice this. Takeyra did everything advocates tell survivors to do. She went to the courts. She filed for protection. She ended it. And yet the system that was supposed to protect her couldn't stop what was coming. If you have ever known someone in an abusive relationship who was too afraid to leave, drop a comment below. What did you see? What do you wish you'd known? And subscribe to Crimes That Happened, because understanding cases like this one is how we start changing what comes next. Night fell on East 63rd Street in Slavic Village, like any other summer evening. Nobody on that block had any reason to expect what was about to happen. Investigators believe Armond Johnson Sr. entered Takeyra's home that night and confronted her inside. What followed was not a moment of rage that lasted seconds. It was deliberate, sustained, and methodical. Prosecutors laid out the evidence at trial. Takeyra Collins was attacked inside her home and sustained multiple injuries. She never made it out of that house. But Johnson was not done. According to prosecutors, he then poured accelerant through parts of the home and set it on fire. The smell of smoke filled every room. And inside that home, still asleep, still waiting for their mother, 2 children, Armond Jr., 6 years old, Aubrey Stone, 2 years old. Firefighters responded to the blaze and worked to bring the flames under control. When they finally got inside, they found the children together. Investigators believe Aubrey had tried to reach her brother in those final moments. That 2-year-old girl moved toward the one person who had always looked out for her. They were found side by side. Both children did not survive the fire. Outside, close to the scene, 35-year-old David Cousin Jr. was coming home. He was a neighbor, a man who, by all accounts, had no connection to Takeyra's relationship with Johnson, no involvement in their history, and no reason whatsoever to be part of what happened that night. But he was outside at the wrong moment, and according to prosecutors, he saw something he was never supposed to see. David Cousin Jr. was found in a vacant field adjacent to the home, having suffered fatal injuries. Prosecutors argued Johnson confronted him near the scene and harmed him specifically to eliminate a witness, a man silenced not because of anything he'd done, but because he happened to be walking home. Police initially responded to reports of a person down in the field. They found David Cousin Jr.'s body first. Then, as officers canvassed the area looking for witnesses, they noticed smoke coming from the nearby home. When they forced entry after smelling smoke, they found Takeyra inside, and then the two children. David Cousin Jr. had nothing to do with any of this. He was coming home. That is the only reason his name is part of this story. His sister, who worked for the Boys and Girls Club of Cleveland, later spoke at the community vigil held in the victim's honor. She said she wanted her brother's death to be part of a bigger message about protecting one another in the community. Notice this. 4 people died that night. 3 of them, the children and David, were entirely innocent bystanders in a conflict they had no part in. What does it tell us about the nature of this kind of violence when it reaches so far beyond its original target? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. Police moved quickly once the full scope of what had happened became clear. Investigators began pulling apart every piece of evidence from the scene, the accelerant used in the fire, the firearm evidence, the location of each victim, and surveillance footage from the surrounding area. One piece of evidence stood out above everything else. After leaving the scene, Johnson allegedly used Takeyra's cell phone to send text messages designed to make it appear she was still alive. He was buying time, creating a false trail to delay the moment anyone would come looking for her. Digital forensics teams dismantled that false timeline completely. Investigators cross-referenced the phone's activity with cell tower data, surveillance footage, and witness statements. The real timeline, the one Johnson tried to bury, emerged piece by piece from the digital record. Cell phone records, DNA evidence, surveillance video, firearm evidence, fire investigation reports, and witness testimony all formed the foundation of the prosecution's case. Johnson was taken into custody on the 9th of July 2019, initially on an unrelated aggravated robbery warrant. Once investigators connected him to the murders, the charges escalated to aggravated murder. Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Michael O'Malley announced the grand jury indictment on multiple counts of aggravated murder and other charges. Before that indictment came down, investigators sat down with Johnson. What followed was a lengthy interrogation that became part of the public record, a window into how investigators confronted him with the evidence they had already assembled. Johnson told detectives he had been at his grandmother's house in Cleveland Heights all night. He said he went to sleep, woke up the next morning, looked out the window to check whether Cynthia had left, and discovered text messages from Takeyra's brother Martez, also known as Tez, and her sister Nia, asking about what had happened. He claimed he never left the house. Investigators walked him through the cell tower data that directly contradicted that account data showing his phone traveling from Cleveland Heights to the area of East 63rd Street and back again during the hours in question. 3 cell towers, all clustered around Takeyra's address, all hitting off the same phone number, all time-stamped within the window of the murders. Then investigators told him something that stopped the interrogation cold. His own aunt had told police she picked him up that morning from the area near East 63rd Street, not from Cleveland Heights. Not from his grandmother's house, from the scene. Sit with that for a moment. The alibi Johnson had spent the entire interrogation building rested on one simple claim. He never left the house. And it was a member of his own family, not a detective, not a surveillance camera, not a digital forensics report who dismantled that claim directly. His aunt placed him at that address. His own phone placed him at that address. And still, Johnson kept repeating the same words. I was at home. I did not do nothing, even as the tower data sat on the table in front of him. Even as investigators described what they had found inside that house, he eventually asked for a lawyer. The interrogation ended. Notice this. Johnson's alibi was dismantled not by a single piece of dramatic evidence, but by the quiet, methodical work of cross-referencing phone records, tower data, surveillance footage, and a family member's own statement. Which piece of evidence do you think was most damaging to his story? Drop your answer in the comments below. The neighborhood response to what had happened was immediate and raw. A vigil drew roughly 100 people, including members of the Boys and Girls Club of Cleveland, an organization that had counted Armond Jr. among its own. David Cousin Jr.'s sister stood at that vigil and asked that her brother's death be part of a broader conversation about protecting one another in the community. Channel 3 news reporter Amani Abraham covered the scene live, reporting alongside anchor Russ as community members gathered wearing purple in honor of the 4 victims. One child at the vigil asked the Cleveland police chief directly, "Why did this happen?" The chief's answer was honest. He said what Johnson had done should not have happened. He told the children that the community standing around them was going to do everything possible to make sure something like this didn't happen to another child in that neighborhood or that city. Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Michael O'Malley stated, "Armond Johnson brutally murdered 4 people, including his own son. His callous actions demand that he face the ultimate punishment." But it was something Takeyra's own family shared at that vigil that cut through every official statement and every moment of public grief with a precision that nothing else in this story comes close to matching. Takeyra's father had been taken by violence in 1994. She was a child when it happened. She grew up without him, raised in the absence of a man who should have been there, shaped partly by a loss that should never have been hers to carry. And now here was her community, standing outside the home where she had just been taken the same way, leaving Armond Jr. and Aubrey without a mother, exactly the way Takeyra had once been left without a father. This system had already failed Takeyra's family once before she was ever born. And in 2019, in the same city, in a different generation, it failed again. The details were different. The outcome was the same. That is the part of this story that doesn't resolve when a verdict comes in. If this detail stopped you, it should. What would it actually take, not in theory, but practically, for a cycle like this to be broken before it reaches the next generation? Tell us in the comments. This is the question this case demands. The trial did not begin until 2022, more than 3 years after the murders. The case was tried in the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas. Prosecutors walked the jury through the complete forensic picture: the cell tower data, the DNA evidence, the fire investigation findings, the surveillance footage. The timeline built from Takeyra's phone records. They presented the case as one with a clear, documented sequence of events leading directly to Johnson. Defense attorneys challenged the reliability of DNA and cell phone evidence and questioned other parts of the investigation, arguing the prosecution had not proven every element beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury deliberated for more than 9 hours. Their verdict: guilty on 14 counts of aggravated murder, 3 counts of aggravated arson, 1 count of kidnapping, 2 counts of child endangerment, and 1 count of tampering with evidence. Johnson was found not guilty on 2 counts of aggravated burglary. Because of the number of aggravated murder convictions, the case moved into a separate sentencing phase where the death penalty was on the table. The jury ultimately spared Johnson's life after hearing evidence that he read at only a 4th grade level and had suffered childhood abuse and neglect. Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Judge Timothy McCormick sentenced Johnson to 4 consecutive terms of life without the possibility of parole. In 2024, Ohio's appellate court reviewed the case and upheld every conviction, rejecting each challenge the defense raised. Notice this: the jury heard evidence of Johnson's own difficult childhood and chose not to recommend death. Do you think that was the right call? Or do you believe the nature of what he did, including the children, warranted the ultimate sentence? There is no easy answer here. Tell us honestly what you think in the comments. And if you want every update on cases like this one, the trials, the verdicts, the appeals, subscribe to Crimes That Happened right now. Turn on notifications. We cover these cases through every stage, not just the headline. Takeyra Collins was 25 years old. She had spent years trying to build something stable for her children, filing paperwork, leaving when she was supposed to leave, doing every single thing that advocates tell survivors to do. It wasn't enough to save her. Armond Johnson Sr. was 6 years old. He was found with his 2-year-old sister, Aubrey Stone. Investigators believe she had tried to reach him in those final moments. They were together at the end. David Cousin Jr. was 35 years old. He lived in the same building as Takeyra. That is the only reason his name is part of this story. Armond Johnson Sr. will spend the rest of his natural life in prison under 4 consecutive sentences of life without parole handed down by Judge Timothy McCormick. The Ohio Appellate Court has confirmed there is no legal path out of that cell for him. For the families of all 4 victims, including Takeyra's brother Martez, her sister Nia, and the sister of David Cousin Jr., who stood at that vigil and asked for something better, the verdict closes a legal chapter. It does not close the loss. Domestic violence experts are consistent on one point. Leaving does not end the danger. It often changes its shape. Takeyra Collins understood the risk and chose herself and her children anyway. She deserved a system strong enough to see that through. If you or someone you know is in a situation like Takeyra's, please reach out to a trusted person, a local domestic violence organization, or a national hotline. Early action can make the difference that the system sometimes cannot. Takeyra Collins, Armond Johnson Sr. Aubrey Stone, David Cousin Jr. Their names deserve to be remembered not for how their lives ended, but for who they were and what was stolen from everyone who loved them. Here is the question this case leaves behind. Takeyra went to the courts. She filed for protection. She left. She did every single thing the system asks survivors to do. What would have had to be different in the law, in the response, in how we treat protective orders for her to still be alive today? Tell us what you think in the comments. Because that answer matters beyond this one case. Subscribe to Crimes That Happened and drop a comment below. We read every single one.